It was recently brought to my attention because I was at a friend's place, and one of my friends asked me, like, who watches your videos? And I couldn't answer it because I genuinely didn't know. I haven't, because I haven't been very active on YouTube, I haven't really checked analytics. So I open up my phone, and there's a YouTube app, and I go onto the analytics page, and I'm looking at the details. And I've realized I've been using the wrong intro because I keep saying ladies and gentlemen, when in fact it's 99.1% gentlemen and 0.9% ladies. So, if you could do me a huge favor, give your phone or your tablet or your laptop to your mum, let her watch a couple of videos, let's get that percentage to 1. That would be bloody great. Now, all jokes aside, I've spent a little bit of time over the past 2 weeks playing the game quite extensively. Not as much as I used to, obviously. I used to play like 10 hours a day, but just trying to experiment with a couple of vehicles, a couple of lineups, mainly a couple of tactics. And I've been trying to bring back a part of the game that I miss. And it's a no-brainer. It's 1.69. I miss the rockets. I miss the close air support. I don't know what it was about it. Maybe it's that when I started playing the game, there were just planes, and so I tend to familiarize with aircraft more. I tend to be better at playing planes. And then tanks were added, and I started playing those, and I thought I was decent at them, but was never quite the top dog. Obviously, I play with the Grassian optics on. I don't play on York Q. I actually have my sound turned off. A few people were surprised by this on stream, probably a couple of new viewers. I don't play with sound. The only reason why there's no sound in this video from the gameplay, it isn't just because I was probably watching a YouTube video in the background or because I was watching a movie or listening to music. It's because there is no sound to start with. My sounds are turned off. Obviously, it's a disadvantage, but I prefer it that way because when I'm listening to music, I want to be immersed in the music, not in the sound of a teammate firing machine guns at me or, attack the D point, attack the D point, because every game's like that. Every game has someone spamming something. Affirmative, affirmative, you got a hole in your left wing. Nobody wants to listen to that bullshit. So in this grand search for sort of reinvigorating close air support, I found two main problems. The first one was finding the vehicle to actually use for close air support. So what plane can I use that has enough armament, that's good armament, that's in, an effective lineup, that has enough maneuverability? Because the thing is, if it has a million rockets, it doesn't matter if you can't get them accurately on target and then leave the area safely without being shot down by AAA. And the second one was, which vehicles am I going to use in order to get enough points for the plane to spawn in? Now, of course, it took me a while because I'm ancient here, and I didn't know that spotting mechanic was a really effective thing, and light tanks are now even easier to use. I mean, it's sort of equivalent to the old rushing the capture point, but a light tank, I think 1 kill and 1 spotting kill was way more than enough to get a plane spawned in. So, done and dusted. Now, what plane are we going to use? Now, the first thought process for me was HVAR. And HVAR turned out to be a failure. Whilst it is useful against SPA, more so against tanks, less so, I just didn't have consistent results with it. So I tried not to use too much of the HVAR sort. The Russian rockets, I didn't really pay much attention to, and then for whatever reason, I flew out the G91. And to be completely fair, I've got a big love-hate relationship with this thing. Because I remember when it was added, when the Italian Tech Tree came out, which was ironically at the time that close air support was at its peak, but this thing sort of broke Error B because it was just a little bit too good for the bat rating it was added at, and it was that turn fighter, do it all thingamajig. So I looked at it and I saw these rockets and they're called Mighty something, and I thought, a rocket that's called Mighty is probably going to be a poop. It wasn't. It was actually really good, and I started to learn these things, and because you have a lot of them, you can spam them out a bit. And you'll see here, like attacking a, what is that, M247. This is my problem, because, I used to play when there were 5 nations, and then they added 2 extra nations, and they added a bunch of new vehicles, and I end up fighting and shooting at a lot of tanks that I don't even know what they are. I don't really know the weak spots, and to be fair and frank, I'm not even entirely sure you need to know the weak spots, because with these new shells with so much penetration, you tend to just, you can save go and just go for the cannon breach and then finish them off. What I'm used to, the old top tier, the 8.7, right? The reminiscent memories of the meta. It was HDFS, it was learning where the ammo racks were, and trying to get one-shot kills all the time because you wanted to maximize the amount of kills you were getting per match. At least, again, this goes hand in hand because at the time of 1.69, I was also grinding for God of War. That meant, 2 shots per kill might mean more experience in total because you're doing more damage, but 1 shot, 1 kill meant more kills. So, one kind of fought the other. And one of the biggest things that I still have issues adjusting to is the SPA. Because when it comes to the radar being, an actual modeled thing in the game, it existed. But did it have a function? It didn't. So if you're playing a Gepard, you didn't get the lead indicator. You didn't know where the player was. You still had to use your ears if you play with sound, or your eyes if you, tilt your camera around. And I think the problem with a lot of people had with SPA was that you always had to spot the plane. And the fact that planes don't have any indicators meant that it was very difficult to actually see that little grey speck in the sky. So one of the actual suggestions that I had was that what they could have done very easily is that radar-guided SPA would have the ability to spot planes. Now, whether this spotting ability would be only for them or for their entire team, that's a debatable thing. But spotting would be quite simple, that the enemy player would get marked. So there would be it maybe didn't have to be a name, but it could at least be, the vehicle. So your teammate would suddenly know, hey, there is in fact a bomber coming in, maybe we should get the hell out of Dodge. So I thought an implementation like that would be positive for the entire team because everybody would benefit from it, not just the person playing the radar-guided SPA. Another idea we had was perhaps heavy tanks. When heavy tanks are sitting in a capture point, if they use their binoculars and look at a player in a plane, they could mark them and then that would notify their SPA. So you could have this cross-teamwork. The same way you have light tanks can spot a tank and say, hey, teammate, there's a guy there behind a house. You could do the same thing with planes. And I was expecting something like this. I was hoping for something like this. And instead we got, I think, what is a half-assed solution, which, again, brings imbalance to the game. And then in the moment when I thought, okay, so I guess this is bad, but it won't get worse, it did. Because they added the SAMs. So they added essentially vehicles that can not just use their insane ATGMs against other vehicles, but they can, brain dead snipe you from across the map. And because the shells don't render properly and because the server desync is always in focus, half the time you're flying in a plane, you get blown to smithereens by a vehicle you can't even see. It just baffles me because War Thunder is built from a triangle: tanks, planes, SPA, and then they added helicopters to the mix, and they seemingly just forgot about everything that was going on. And I think the one part that still confuses me the most is when you still have players today complaining about close air support. And this is because some people just want to play tanks. I get it. You want to spawn your tank in, you don't want to worry about anything else, and you don't care about SPA in your lineup, you don't care about planes in your lineup. I get it. Unfortunately, this ain't World of Tanks. And I think, I can't say this because I don't have the statistics. I haven't looked into it at all. But I have a feeling that when close air support was prevalent and when lineups were becoming a matter of discussion, there were so many people out there who either had just purchased a premium or they just didn't care about it. And I think that resulted in a tremendous amount of players who had one vehicle in their lineup, no SPA, didn't care about the plane. If it was just a fighter, didn't have any rockets, they didn't know how to use it. And I think one of the biggest pains of close air support for a lot of people was that they just weren't very good at it. Because close support looks easy, but it's kind of hard. And the reason it's hard is because it's expensive. To get enough points to spawn a plane in first, and then to do well enough in that plane to still have spawn points left over is an art form. And I'm not saying this because, I'm so good at close air support. No, I mean, I used to be extremely good. I still have certain traits that I think make me above average. Long-range sniping is one of those. But with long-range sniping, it's a matter of luck. It's a matter of, hey, is that tank on the ground even going to render? This is something I haven't talked about, but tanks don't render. Vehicles don't render. If you're on the ground, you're an SPA, you can spot a plane from the other side of the map, even if you're playing on, Volkolamsk. But if you're in a plane, you have to come within a certain render distance for that tank to actually appear to you, which is ridiculous. Not to mention the new ATGMs, I think they're just glitching out. Like, you don't see them. They're teleporting over the screen. They have this weird vortex effect, which I don't care how it looks like in real life. This is a video game. If there's an ATGM flying my bloody way, I want to see it. I want to know it's there so I can do something about it. And so in my search for close air support, I've found one major problem, and that is finding a battle rating at which I get to get a good lineup, enough strong, powerful planes that I can do effective close air support with, and that is not high enough for there to be the new SPA. Because the brain process is this. I'm flying a plane here I'm not extremely comfortable with. The G91, I don't have much experience with. I'm learning the rocket, and yet I'm fighting something like, say, a Gepard or a DCA 30 or AMX, whatever it is. These SPA, the SPA of battle rating 8.0, are something I'm used to because I've played them. And one matter of learning War Thunder for me has always been about trial and error. And I've always said, if you don't know how to fight, this is so prevalent in air battles. This is where my pilot side comes in. Someone says, hey, I'm fighting a Yak and a BF-19. How do I duel them? And my tip is always, get the Yak. Get the Yak and fight the opposite way. Reverse the roles. That way you learn the strengths, the weaknesses, and you sort of have a broader picture of how to do these dogfights. And now those of you who've paid attention to the video, and those of you who remember how top tier used to look, you probably know that 8.3 was dominated by Sabres, it was dominated by up-tiered Su-6s, and by Venoms and Meteor Mark 8s. Those vehicles are now more or less gone. The Meteor and the Venom, well, the Venom is too high of a BR, the Meteor F8 is still usable. The Sabres are completely worthless, because the HVAR don't do enough damage, because the positioning of the HVAR required it to be... This is what I miss. What I miss is that the Sabre in particular, it had a specific location of rockets on its wings. They were not in a pod, like in this plane. The G91, every rocket you fire more or less comes from the same point, which means you don't have to adjust your aim after every rocket you fire. On the Sabre, every single rocket salvo came from a different position on the wings, and that took a ridiculous amount of skill. Now, that's not to say that you can't use the Sabre. Of course you could, but at 9.0 you'll be fighting against SPA, which can spot you from a mile away, SPA, which have radar, SPA, which have ranging missile, nuclear warhead, depleted uranium, I don't even know what they've got. But hey, feel free to take your plane, which will have taken about twice, 3 times the amount of spawn points than an SPA will, and then as soon as you make one tiny little mistake, you get blown to smithereens. So why play a plane? You know, is there even an incentive to play a plane? And I think the answer to that question is, in fact, no. You shouldn't be playing planes. In top tier, that's where you have helicopters. But the reason you have helicopters is so they can hide behind hills and snipe from, you know, a distance where tanks can't even see them. We've reached a point in this game, especially in top tier, where the development was so rapid and the request of community for certain fixes that I believe were not necessary was so vocal that you now have a game mode that is an absolute shit show. And to this day, I believe that there will be a moment when people look back and they wish 1.69 had stayed. They wish the old top tier was still there to be played, and they wish they would have just bothered to have learned how to play SPA and not request for this radar-guided ridiculousness. But of course, War Thunder is a game of rapid development, and its community is a, well, game of opinions. I think it's only going to get controlled by more and more power creep, because that's the way that things have gotten balanced forever around here. Whenever something was strong, either its repair cost goes up, or, well, something more powerful gets added, so you forget about the first thing being powerful in the first place. And the solution that Gaijin will take is probably one of low friction, so something like adding air-to-ground missiles, which will of course result in those air-to-ground missiles primarily being used for meme purposes and then occasionally sniping in SPA. How they're going to be against tanks, we don't know. Obviously, the dev server will tell when they actually add it, and then of course everybody will jump on the dev server and they'll be like, "Oh, things are gonna be changing in the live server," and then the same thing will be uploaded, and then everybody will be really, really unhappy. But then another dev server will come out and they're gonna add even more amazing tanks with it's always the same story. For me, I'm gonna try to play as much of 8.3 or thereabouts that I can enjoy. And then, of course, when things change, then I have to go and scavenge for something else, which I felt like that a lot recently in War Thunder. At least the few battle ratings I've tried, the game modes I've tried, it feels like there's just too much to choose from. And then whatever you choose from, it doesn't have that, brilliance to it anymore. And there was a video recently, there was a podcast from Joe Rogan that I listened to, which was that a man who's healthy has 1,000 desires. A man who's sick only has one. And Warden has too much to choose from. There's too many things that you can do, and not one of them is perfectly executed. In 1.69, I had tournaments that worked. I had a map rotation which was perfect. I had balance between planes, tanks, and SPA. I had no rendering issues. I don't remember there being ghost shells. I remember being able to use HeatFS and go through Amorex on a reliable way. While perhaps there wasn't some universal brilliant balance in the game, there was consistency. And that consistency is still miles better than anything you have in the game today. So there will be a time you look back and you hope that shitty close air support rocket spamming game mode makes it back, even if just for one day.